What's up, everyone? Aaron Nagler here with Cheesehead TV, talking some football with Andy Herman, the Don of the Pack-A-Day podcast and purveyor of fine Packers takes across the internet. Andy, how the hell are you on this fine Monday?
I'm doing great. Fun March Madness so far. Just tons of Packer free agency news.
So much Packers news to
that
just
we can dive
into. People, yeah. I literally had someone ask, are you even going to have a talk football this week? We always talk football. Come on. There's always something to talk about. I was teasing you a couple days ago about your fretting. Maybe that's not the right word, but starting to wonder if the Packers are going to make a move at the cornerback position. And obviously there is a bit of a hole sitting there opposite Jaire Alexander. Kevin King is a free agent. Who knows how they feel about Josh Jackson, Kadar Holman, your boy, Kabion Ento, and various others. What do you think the play is there? Because I do think there are still possibilities in free agency, but to me, I wouldn't be surprised if the plan is just Josh Jackson and away they go. And I know that kind of sounds crazy after he was inactive for much of the end of the season, but he is an asset. He is a former draft pick. He has been in the building for X number of years. You can get by with him. Obviously, you don't want to just get by. What do you think the plan is at corner?
I don't know. I have no idea.
Fair. Thanks a lot, ladies and gentlemen.
Yes.
Have a great day.
I thought I knew going in. So Brian Gutekunst has not been shy about addressing his kind of big area of need every offseason. So the first offseason, tight end goes and gets Graham and Mercedes. Same with defensive back. Not only does he bring back Tremont and House, but goes and gets Jaire Alexander and Josh Jackson. Next time it's guard, signs Billy Turner and drafts Elton Jenkins. Same offseason. What was the other one? It doesn't even matter anymore. Safety, Savage and Amos, and then edge rusher, Gary Za'Darius and Preston. Exactly. So all of them, anytime there's been a significant hole where a position hasn't, proved up to the task, he's gone out and addressed it fairly aggressively. And I know that funds aren't exactly there to pull out of the ATM and go spend big, but just based on previous experience and what he's done the last few seasons, I expected that to be the case with corner, with going out and getting a player and then, investing draft picks, whether that's a first or second or third, who knows, but something to, infuse some talent into that room. I still very much believe that they're going to be in the conversation for a corner in the first or second round as both now and in the future, right? We know they're going to be the best player available for the future, but right now it's Jaire Alexander, and whether it's now or in the future, it's a bunch of question marks, whether it's Jackson or Holloman or, Ento or whomever else, just question marks. So I think that's definitely going to be part of the plan still. I still feel like there's going to be somebody, and maybe that somebody is Kevin King. Maybe that somebody is, Quentin Dunbar. Maybe it's AJ Bouye. I don't know who, but I still feel like there's going to be a free agent signing, and maybe it's somebody who's released at the end of training camp and they pick it up later. And I know, and Packer fans are, impatient with this. Hell, I'm starting to get impatient with this to some extent, but I also think Brian Gutekunst is right that roster building is a 365-day-a-year process, and they're going to look for ways to upgrade the position all throughout the year. And if that's not now, so be it. But I think he's still going to be involved at corner in some capacity.
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned the possibility of picking up someone who's cut later down the line. And I do think that is something that tends to escape the purview of most fans and probably most media members when it comes to how they might be going about targeting guys. Because, look, you and I, we are obsessed and we cover this team 365. There's no question about the fact that we are paying attention, right? Yeah. But I guarantee you there are guys in the personnel group who have gone through all 31 other teams and projected out who's probably going to get cut, who's in danger of getting cut in other programs once free agency plays out, once the offseason and the draft and what have you has happened. And I'm not saying that's the plan, but the idea of that being an option is very much on the table in-house. Like, they know who might be available. They have their big boards of free agents and possible free agents, etc. So it's not like they're completely flying blind, both in free agency and going, well, if we don't get this, we have to trust on the draft. But I do think that's something, because we've seen that play out before a couple years ago when they were kind of holding their cards, so to speak, at outside backer, and everyone was wondering what they were going to do. It ended up they went after a couple of guys who were released from the 49ers. Elliot Wolf put it plainly afterwards that, yeah, that was the plan. we knew that they were going to be cut for cap reasons, most likely, and that was who we were going to go after, and that worked out. So I do think that that's a perfect example of how, even as people who are, like I said, we are all over this as much as humanly possible, there are just so many other levels to it. Maybe not like a ton, but there are other things going on that we can't be privy to. And ideas that we're not, kind of around, so to speak.
Yeah, really quick there too. We're at the point kind of in free agency, especially at the cornerback position, where all the top talent outside of, maybe a Richard Sherman, which I don't see happening, and a Dory Jackson, who I think will probably be signed by the end of today by not the Packers.
Right.
The difference in talent between corners who are going to be available, after the draft is pretty much the same as the talented corners that are available right now. So I can easily see them taking a wait and see approach and saying, hey, what if they don't know what's going to happen on draft day, right? They may have an idea, but they don't have the exact positions that they're going to select. What happens if they have another draft where they get corner in the first and second round? Well, you guess what? It's probably not going to be maybe as much of a need at that point, or maybe they spend lesser on it. But I do think that the difference now between the talent there and what's going to be there later is probably not that great. And maybe they do just take a wait and see approach and see what happens in the draft first.
Speaking of the draft, I think that dovetails nicely into something you tweeted the other day regarding your work for the draft guide here at Cheesehead TV. You have been breaking down the corners, and I know there's a bit of a groundswell at this point, I think, at least in my mentions, for either Greg Newsome or Asante Samuel Jr. And I know we've spoken about those guys before here. Are there any other prospects you think could possibly fit the bill at 29 or on day 2 in regards to not necessarily having to come in and start right away, although I think either of those gentlemen could? But are there any guys who you think, okay, maybe they're not getting, trumpeted, so to speak, by the media, but could fit and could walk in and compete?
Yeah, so at pick 29, I'm going to go ahead and assume, which is never a safe assumption, but I'm going to assume Farley, Surtain, and J.C. Horn are probably gone at that point. So I think there's still a handful, 3 or 4 guys that really make sense. Newsome, to me, would be an absolute no-brainer. Not only does he have just raw talent coverage skills, he's more than a willing tackler, but you also add still some decent size outside of Jaire Alexander. So Asante Samuel, I love him all day. He reminds me, if any corner reminds me of Jaire in this draft, it is Asante Samuel. I do think you have to wonder, and I am 1,000,000% of the mind where if you can cover, you can cover, and I don't care that much. But 2 5'10" corners on the outside.
That's the question. Would they go there?
Yeah, exactly. Right. So I don't know that they would do that. If they would, I personally, I wouldn't have any issue with it, but you could run into mismatches down. Like, you want somebody to be able to cover Allen Robinson that has, some
a little length, a little height. Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Absolutely.
So I don't know that they would go in that direction, but if they would, I would love it in a heartbeat. Ifeatu Melifonwu, I'm butchering the first name, I'm sure, but Obi Melifonwu's brother, he is way more fluid at corner than Obi ever was at corner safety or wherever he played. And he is just a ridiculous athlete. He's like 6'3" freak. And this is not, to me, a Kevin King scenario where he struggles with the in-breaking routes. He can flip his hips, he can click and close. And then you also have just a massively willing tackler, like an impact tackler that's going to come up and absolutely obliterate someone when needed. So
what a refreshing change that would be.
Yes, exactly. So those 3 all would be, 100% options. And then I think you could see somebody like an Eric Stokes too, who I'm a little bit lower on, but that doesn't mean anything, right? Like there's pluses and minuses to every single one of these players. And there's a lot of positives with Eric Stokes. And he has a little bit of Sam Shields to his game where he's kind of ball skills and straight line speed. Maybe not always the in and out, but you love the raw talent and ability. And again, somebody across from Jaire with a little bit more size, great speed, great ball skills, that's certainly still going to be an upside play there. So I think any of those guys at 29 could make a lot of sense. Yeah, so I'll start there. I don't know if any of those you want to dig into deeper, but
well, no, I mean, here's the thing. Like, I love all the information you just gave is phenomenal because, like I always say at this time of year, like the draft, I don't dive in until I kind of narrow it down to, okay, we can see how the first round, there's a good chance that X, Y, and Z will be there. X, Y, and Z won't be. I think McGinn does a great job of breaking that down in his draft series as far as sure will be gone, possible, definitely won't be there, all that kind of stuff. But going back to guys that are already in the building, The Josh Jackson thing is interesting to me because, like I said, he is a draft pick, a premium one at that, who clearly has not panned out. I don't think there's any doubt in anybody's mind that he is not, quote unquote, the answer. But I do think he's a bit of a kind of a fallback, break glass in case of emergency. We saw last year they can get by with him at corner. Again, you don't want to just get by. But I do wonder if the plan has been, look, we're not going to overspend here early on. You mentioned a couple guys. Like I've talked about AJ Bowie as a possibility in free agency because he is coming off injury. He is facing suspension. That is undoubtedly going to drive down his price. So
played
maybe
in Fangio's defense
and has played in this scheme. So that's a possibility. And if they can make it work financially, that makes sense. But if they can't, if none of those options work, you could do a lot worse than throwing Josh out there as far as, okay, you know, he's a bigger guy. He's been in your building. He's been in your program. Yes, you are changing defenses. You are changing schemes. What you're going to be asking these guys to do is probably a bit different than what he was being asked to do under Mike Pettin. But you know he's worked primarily, if not exclusively, for the last year plus at that perimeter spot opposite Jaire. He's got seasoning. You know what he can do and what he can't do as far as being able to put him in the best possible situation, rolling coverage to his side, etc. I'm not saying that's the answer, but I gotta think, especially going into a year where it's so clear there's a gaping hole there, I gotta think that is the fallback plan. You know, if free agency doesn't pan out, if the draft just happens to fall in a certain way that it just never kind of materializes where there's value when they're on the clock, or there's not a guy worth jumping up to get in whatever round, I just think that's kind of not a fail-safe plan, but it's a fallback plan that I can live with if nothing else kind of breaks their way.
So a couple of things on that. So I think first of all, you go through a regular season with Josh Jackson instead of Kevin King. I don't think there's that much difference. Exactly. I don't think it's that much where it's like a difference between a game or two. Maybe here or there, you know, he gives up an additional play.
Hey, I'll bet you $1 million Josh doesn't get beat at that touchdown at the end of the NFC Championship game first half because he grabs the guy.
Yes,
so at least you get the penalty.
Very
at least you get the penalty.
He also may not misjump the first one in the back of the end zone.
So, no doubt.
But you know, there's no doubt that he has tremendous ball skills and he's a talented player. He's got to clean up the holding. There's no question there. But I don't think your win-loss record has changed one iota if you go Josh Jackson for a season instead of Kevin King. But I will say this, and I mentioned this on the Pack-A-Day video this morning. I think, and we've seen this, and I use kind of an NBA analogy where you go through a regular season with Giannis and Chris Middleton and everything works great. And then you get into the playoffs. And if you got an Eric Bledsoe and a Brook Lopez and a few other, you know, miscreants out on the floor that can't hang, those are situations where you quickly realize that in playoff basketball, those are mismatches that teams are going to take advantage of and you can't live with. And I think in the NFC Championship game, to an extent, you saw in the regular season, Kevin King, Chandon Sullivan, you can get by with those. But in an NFC Championship game, when you have an assassin like Tom Brady at quarterback and you have a plethora of wide receiving options, they're going to quickly find your Kevin Kings, your Josh Jacksons, your Chandon Sullivans, and they are going to attack them aggressively throughout the game. And
no doubt.
So I think regular season, I don't think there's any difference in win-loss. But I do think come playoff time, especially when it's accentuated by the fact that Jaire's on one side and you're not throwing at him. So you're going to throw a ton of balls all day long at Josh Jackson, Kevin King, Chandon Sullivan, whoever else is out there. So they have to be up to the task. And I think Josh can fill in fine for King, as I mentioned. And I think if the pass rush is better this season, which it has to be, and you're banking on, it can work. But I still think you'd obviously like to upgrade if possible.
Let's kick it into the inside part of the defense. We'll keep it all defense today. What the hell? Since that, you know, you coming off last season, like most seasons in Green Bay, you know, that's the side that needs to continue to improve. You mentioned the pass rush, no doubt, definitely need improvement there. But when you look at the inside part of it, when you look at the Kamal Martin, Chris Barnes tandem, which you have right now, you would think is your probably go-to as far as the Packers go, and Barnes probably being 1 and Martin being 1A, depending on what happens in camp, etc., this offseason, what have you. Do you think the Packers are going to continue to, and I know this is the word that most fans use, is devalue the inside backer spot? Or do you think a shocker could, say, come at 29 if there's a player there sitting that they think makes sense?
I think they're going to run with with Barnes and Martin and Summers and mostly go with that. And I think they'll still take an inside linebacker some part day 3 of the draft, probably. Maybe if something happens, maybe third round, but
another 4th rounder.
Exactly, maybe. Yeah, but I just think that, and the only way I could see something different happening is if, with a new defensive coordinator, if Joe Barry says, listen, in order for this defense to work, I need an alpha in the middle of this team that can really make things go. If he says that and that's the way they feel, then maybe there's a little bit more of a conversation there. Then maybe they move up to the 2nd or 3rd round instead of the 4th or 5th. But there's no free agents there at inside linebacker right now that are remotely going to be an alpha there. That's going to be a massive upgrade. I do have some faith in Chris Barnes. I still think Kamal Martin has the athleticism, although the instincts were more than a hair off last year, and I have some question marks there. Yeah. But I think they're going to run with those guys. Even we saw some Ty Summers and, when injuries hit to Kirksey last year. So
look, the Ty Summers thing is interesting because, like, I get it why he's out there, right? Like, I had so many people during the season and even in chats lately talking about Ty Summers and like ripping him apart. And look, I get it. He plays with his hair on fire. The problem is the rest of him catches on fire sometimes too, and he's out of position. He misses tackles, etc. But he's only out there because of injuries. Like, they're not saying, oh, we got to get Ty Summers on the field.
Nope.
But to me, that's a perfect example of where they have got to improve the depth and they've got to improve the competition, because there are so many instances last season where when the Ty is thrust into having to play, it just doesn't work. It's not up to snuff.
It's really funny. You mentioned the chats. Like, I think the difference in opinion on Ty Summers might be as much as any player on the Packers team, because there are a subset of fans.
Oh, there are some truthers.
All in on Ty Summers being like, he needs to be the guy. He is the number 1 linebacker. And then there's others like, why is he on the team? There's no in between.
There's no gray area.
He's the starter or he needs to be cut tomorrow. And obviously, like always, the truth is in the middle, where if he's your number 4 linebacker and core special teams player, he has a legitimate.
That's perfect. Really, that's exactly where he should live.
Yep.
100%. Very much agreed. All right, Andy, I'm going to get out of here. I can't thank you enough for hanging out, talking football as we do each and every week here at Cheesehead TV. Please check out Andy's stuff at Pack-A-Day, at Packer Report, everywhere else on the internet, because that's where he lives. Andy, thanks so much for the time, man.
You bet. And pre-order that Cheesehead TV draft guide.
Get the draft guide, folks. It's ready to go. Drop it.